Welcome to the inaugural WTR Biotech Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by Paul Romness, CEO of OS Therapies, NYSE ticker symbol OSTX, a clinical stage cancer immunotherapy company developing new treatments for osteosarcoma and other solid tumors. Also joining us is my colleague Do Kim, Senior Research Analyst and Mastermind behind the new bi-weekly WTR Biotech Spotlight podcast series of Water Tower Research. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining today's podcast.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Paul?
Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you as well. Paul, could you please provide a brief background on yourself and the company just to kick off today's podcast, please?
Well, it's an honor to be the inaugural guest on your kickoff here. It's been a great beginning of the year for us. OS Therapies was founded around a very rare but very deadly cancer, bone cancer called osteosarcoma. Usually happens in teenagers. I've been in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry my entire career. Happened upon this disease on a personal level because my daughter's best friend got it. She's doing great, but she's one of the fortunate ones. A lot of kids pass away from this, and we really wanted an option for her and other patients if it metastasized to the lungs. And trying to prevent metastasis in solid tumors is the key to increasing survival.
Great. Joe?
So you recently shared phase 2 data for your lead drug, OST-HER2, in this indication of recurrent lung-only metastatic osteosarcoma. I'm just thinking that maybe before we dive into those results, and definitely want to talk about that, maybe you can tell us about how that drug works and what that therapeutic need is in this cancer type.
So what we're doing is giving the body an attenuated or weakened biologic infection, listeria. We also fuse a HER2 vector to it. The body realizes there's a foreign, really nasty bug, biologic infection, and the body starts to secrete T cells from the lymph nodes. Those killer T cells or lymphocytes are going out looking for these listeria that aren't there because we've shut down the immune, the biologic infection with antibiotic at 4 hours, but the immune response is already kicked out, and the body is sending these T cells to find these what we call cancer seeds. They're little micrometastases that have survived the chemo that these kids have gotten for 7 months. Those little micrometastases are trying to land in the lungs and the brain because what they're looking for is oxygen and soft tissue, and what better place than in the lungs and the brain. And so those lymphocytes see those as listeria, even though they're not, and they do hand-to-hand combat and kill the micrometastases before they can land in the lungs.
I think that this is a fairly novel way of approaching it. Typically, when you have cancer companies trying to develop what essentially is a cancer vaccine, use a viral lipid particle. How is this different using listeria?
Well, that's the interesting thing, and I think our technology was ahead of its time. Some of the listeria vaccines or immunotherapies, we call it an off-the-shelf immunotherapy, were certainly ahead of their time. The difference with our mechanism of action is that listeria, which those lymphocytes are looking for, is an intercellular biologic infection, just as those little micrometastases are intracellular. So it structures very nicely for this mechanism of action because they're going at these very precise, very small micrometastases before they can land.
Right. And you're looking at this initial indication in osteosarcoma, but it is a subgroup that has lung-only metastases and also fully resected. Why this population? What makes this drug work in this cancer type?
So great question, Doe. We specifically chose this subsection of patients because it's the most challenging. And osteosarcoma is one of the most challenging solid tumors out there. We know that if a patient does metastasize to the lungs and it's resected, that a very, very high percentage of them, anywhere from 87 to 91%, will have another metastasis within a year. So that was a great control for us. And since we did the trial and only about, well, 2/3 of them recurred, but a third did not, that's a significant improvement on that baseline. And we also believe that we're preventing metastasis. It was a single arm trial because you can't really do a placebo arm with very high, 87 to 91 recurrence rate. So we believe that, and we will be going for labeling with the FDA of preventing metastasis. So the problem with osteosarcoma is half the kids recur, half of them don't. You don't know which one is going to recur. So with the very minimal side effects that we have, chills, slight fever, which means the immune system's getting fired up, which is exactly what we're trying to do, why wouldn't you give this to your child or your patient?
Right. And you spoke a bit about the phase 2 results. How was that study designed? And it sounds like you didn't have a comparator arm because it doesn't make sense. What is the comparator that you're using and to show that you have benefit over whatever's out there?
So the original comparator was an amalgam of 7 failed trials through the Children's Oncology Group. They all had some sort of treatment, but they either had significant side effects or they weren't efficacious. What we're looking and what the FDA has requested from us through our breakthrough designation is what's called a synthetic or patient matched control. So we've identified some databases in Europe where we can compare the 39 or 41 patients that we had in our clinical trial by age, by sex, by disease state, and then line those up with databases in Europe of the same sex, same age, same disease state, so that we're comparing apples to apples. And we're in the process of cleaning up that database that will then submit to the FDA for their feedback.
In your data set, and I thought that the benefit was significant because it passed the statistical bar, but it was based on that collection of historical controls that the FDA wanted better match cases with.
Correct.
How will that data look after you sort out match cases, and will it maintain the significance? I think that is an important question.
We will get to the significance. I think there are enough patient records in the UK, France, and Germany, part of the patient registry there, and they keep really good records. If not, we'll identify more patients at some of the institutes that we did our clinical trial, and we did our trial at 21 of the top children's hospitals across the country. They have incredible records of patients. The results, we don't know, right? The results will be what they are. I think clinicians and people close to the osteosarcoma community think it will be much lower than 20% of what we already used, and those were statistically significant, even with at 20%. But we think it'll be somewhere in the 8 to 13%, but we don't know it because we won't control the results of it. We'll just control the case match control, making sure that those parameters of, age, sex, disease state line up. And then the data will tell us what the data will tell us.
Right. And in your press release, you gave us a glimpse of what some match controls would look like. And it came much lower, I think around 11%, than the 20% that was assumed in the trial. but it didn't reach significance, and I believe that's because you didn't have enough patients in that
Correct.
match control, right? And if
Correct.
you increase the number of patients and maintain that 11, definitely lower than 20%, you should receive significant.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
We think when we get the numbers up, the n values up, the p value will get better. And then again, what those numbers say is up to those numbers.
Right, right. How does the safety look like? Even in cancer therapies, you have to have a good risk benefit profile. So you didn't mention much on safety in your release. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, because there really wasn't much issues at all. There were no serious adverse events. The most common side effects were chills and slight fever, which is a great indication that your immune system's getting fired up, right? This is a significant immune response, though. With a flu response, you have like 2 immune responses. With COVID vaccine, I think it was 3 or 4 immune responses. When the body detects listeria, and again, remember that we're shutting it down at hour 4, but when the body detects listeria, it's like a 5-alarm fire. There are 10, 11, 12, 13 immune responses. And that's why there's such a significant lymphocyte or T cell response.
Fantastic. One of the things the FDA will look for in full approval, I know you guys are going for accelerated approval, but full approval, in long term, they want survival data. And you provided some interim survival in your release, but final survival comes at 3 years. What is your confidence in that maintaining the trend, reaching significance at 3 years, and how important to you and probably FDA in confirming 3-year survival?
Obviously, overall survival is incredibly important to the patients. It's in our name. When we started OS Therapies, it stood for osteosarcoma, but now that we are in the regulatory process and we'll pivot towards other cancers, that OS now stands for overall survival. And, you know, with some of the sub data from the trial, including time to next recurrence being extended out with our therapy and the overall survival initial indications, it seems that we're tracking that overall survival will be even more of a significant impact for these patients than event-free survival.
And could you tell us historically what the 3-year survival would be, so we could have in our mind a bar when you guys have that data?
It's very low. I haven't looked at it recently. Obviously, we were only looking at 1 and 2 year data, 1 and 2 year overall survival. I'll introduce my Chief Business Officer, Gerald Commisiong. He may remember that number, and he and I are both very familiar with the other data in the trial.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So when you look at the data we showed 1 year 91 versus 80, 2 year 61 versus 40, 3 year we think is closer in the 20% range, but the 5 year data is where there's a lot harder data, and that's 10% ish or less. And so the idea here, of course, if you think about a Kaplan-Meier curve, that we are kind of extending things out, we will see. Certainly 100% of the patients that achieved 1 year overall survival are still alive, and we reported that data. I think one of the issues, not issues necessarily, but one of the things that we wish maybe we had looked at differently now that we have the data, to be able to help those patients, is once a patient recurred, they came off therapy. And as a result of coming off therapy, they didn't get the benefit of potentially boosting. And we did see in the data that patients who had multiple recurrences actually did better on our therapy, whereas typically they do much worse. And obviously patients who have 1 recurrence, they end up getting multiple recurrences. So if out of the 28 patients we had, 27 hit the 12-month event-free survival, 21 did not. Had those 21 gotten therapy after that first recurrence, in the second recurrences, 55% of patients hit that 12-month event-free survival. So, you could, if that held, you could see a scenario where those, 11 out of the 21 potentially in their second go around may have prevented recurrence. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about really bending the curve on survival. So I think, from a practical standpoint, we will see how it goes. But from a, from a medical standpoint, if you continue to treat, which is probably what physicians would do if a patient recurred and they resect, they would put them back on therapy. You may really have a really significant outcome, and that's kind of the kind of data we think that we could find out if the product was on the market, and then we continue to do follow-up studies. That's the kind of thing that we would continue to monitor, and that's why we think in general, it makes a lot of sense to get this in patients because of the strong safety profile and the potential to really answer some of these questions and see if we really bend the curve on survival.
No, that's great. I mean, if you're able to retreat and get additional responses or have the patient re-respond, that would be amazing. So as you approach the FDA about this accelerated approval path, you've had some prior discussions with them, talked about match controls. What is your confidence in that the FDA will accept this accelerated filing? We've known biotech companies go in with expectations and come out having to conduct another trial. And you talked about having your belief that no additional patients are expected to be treated in studies. What gives you that confidence?
So if the environment at the FDA is changing, I think it may be changing in a way that benefits patients and benefits this regulatory review. Just looking at the FDA history, last year over 60 orphan drugs were approved with single arm phase 1, phase 2 trials. The side effects are so significant for not treating these patients, right? The results, the end results of not treating these patients by the recurrence coming, that doing a placebo control, armed trial is considered unethical by the FDA and by many people. So this is such a deadly disease. The side effects are so minimal, and the patient community and the treatment community, the provider community, are very strongly behind what we're doing. And so when we go to the FDA, they will be going with us, and then we'll be going with our data.
And you also mentioned about a priority review voucher program. Can you talk about how you're eligible for it and what that could mean financially for the company?
Sure. And we were given the rare and pediatric disease designation about a few weeks after we started the trial back in October of 2021. We got the rare and pediatric disease designation in November of 2021. With that, with a very simple application, if we were to get conditionally approved, then we would get the priority review voucher. As you may be following, it has not been reauthorized, but anyone with a rare and pediatric disease designation gets grandfathered in through September of next year. There's some discussion about the value of the PRV continuing to go up, whether or not there's reauthorization. That's really dependent on the demand for these vouchers. And the supply has been limited even before the reauthorization didn't happen. So, the last one just sold for $150 million. The going rate has been $100 million. Either of those would be fine for us. But to be very clear, we do strongly believe that this legislation should be reauthorized. It's one of those cases, though, where the legislation's intent is coming through, right? Companies are developing more rare and pediatric disease therapies. So, whatever the GAO says, this system seems to be working.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the priority voucher should also remain, and I like the direction that the FDA has been going over the past few years and the accelerated approvals. There's been a lot of great innovation in biotech, and therapies need to get out there. You recently acquired ownership of the platform. What motivated that move, and what does it bring to the company?
So many of your investors would be familiar with Advaxis. They were the company that out-licensed the technology from University of Pennsylvania, our Listeria platform. When we started negotiating with them in December of 2018, we were a fledgling new company. We were a much smaller company. We've since grown. Obviously, our IPO and some of our financing have given us the funding and the market cap to kind of take control of our own destiny with the platform. We wanted to make sure that the IP was protected. We wanted to make sure that the entire platform was being utilized as much as possible. There are 2 INDs we received with this transaction. And we also significantly reduced our royalty payments and eliminated some milestone payments. So probably the best financial decision the company's done in many years. And it was a good deal for Advaxis, now called Ayala, because they are really becoming more of a equity-based company. So they took some equity in the company, and if we benefit, they benefit. So great opportunity for both of us.
Yeah, congratulations. I think that was a very smart move. And I hear that you're in partnership discussions or approaching potential partners for a possible launch, commercialization. What is the thinking around there? Going forward in commercialization, are you looking for US partners, global, regional?
Yes. So, we're looking for partners for both human and canine. As you might remember, dogs get osteosarcoma a lot more than humans. 30 to 40,000 dogs a year in the United States get osteosarcoma, as opposed to only 1,000 kids a year in the United States, 20,000 kids globally. And specific to that, we are looking for a ex-US partner to out-license and commercialize the human indication because of the huge unmet medical need globally. We would consider a global partner, or we'll commercialize it ourselves here in the US. But we are also looking for a global, or at least US, commercial partner for the canine indication. As you know, people love their dogs, and a dog that gets osteosarcoma, about 100% of them, close to 100% of them, are dead within a year.
Tim, you want to take the last question?
Yes, sir. This has been extremely insightful, Paul, Gerald, and Do. In wrapping up, Paul, what impact does the recent capital raise have on the company's current financial status?
Well, I think the markets liked it when we announced it. Not often you announce a PIPE and the market and your price of your stock goes up, but it was done 90% by insiders, and it gets us through into 2026. So really made us financially independent for the next 11, 12 months, gives us the ability to do the things we need to do, like finish off the trial, payments on the trial, regulatory process, some manufacturing for the approval, and taking control of the platform technology. So
that's awesome. Now that amount of runway ahead of you. Thank you for joining us today, Paul and Gerald of OS Therapies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Also, thanks to my equity research colleague and the creator of the WTR Biotech Spotlight podcast series, Do Kim.
Always a pleasure, Tim, and thank you, OS Therapies, for joining us as well.
It's an honor.
Finally, Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, WTR colleague Joe Brunetto. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as listening to www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, and conference schedules. We will see you in 2 weeks for the next edition of the WTR Biotech Spotlight podcast.